Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
And welcome everybody to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. If you notice, I'm not as upbeat as I usually am today. I bet you can guess why. It is because the problem child ripped our hearts out this weekend as he took out the legend, Anderson Silva. And I'm just like, listen, I don't have the energy right now. I'm a little disappointed. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host right away. You can follow him at Twitter, John Morgan _MMA. He is John Morgan. John, how you doing, pal?
I'd love to say that I could just pick it up, but I'm feeling that same sadness you are, man. Ever since Saturday night, I just had a hard time with it. And, you know, I want to make it clear, Eric, first off, it's not hate for Jake Paul. I know there's a lot of people out there cheering against Jake Paul because they don't like the guy. I'm not in that camp. I respect the man's hustle. I mean, the empire that he's built, you know, starting from the YouTube days to now, taking the sport of boxing very, very seriously. I mean, he is investing his life into this. So it's not about that. And I think for a lot of people, it's like, I hate that guy. I want him to lose. It's not that for me. For me, it's just Anderson Silva is a legend. And to see him go out like that, it's just true. Father Time is undefeated. And I think at 47 years old, that just wasn't the version of Anderson Silva that could get it done.
All right, listen, I'm going to do a complete reset right now. And bam. Okay, I'm over it. Now let's get into it. I'm unemotional from now on. Listen, I'm a fan. And like, listen, I said last week, Jake Paul, if you do it, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to give you your props. Guess what? You get your props from me. I've been giving you props for a long time. And everybody said, oh, you know, Ben Askren, like he's going to lay against him and he's never felt power like Ben Askren in a clinch. Wrong. Okay. Now Tyron Woodley, wrong again. And then the second time in devastating fashion. And then now this is Anderson Silva. And say what you want. 47 years old. He's still Anderson freaking Silva. And he still beat Anderson Silva. Jake Paul, I take my hat off to you. I have hat head right now, so I'm not really going to do it. But like figuratively, I'm taking my hat off to you. Listen, you did what needed to be done. And credit is where credit's due. Because listen, you did what you said you were going to do. You promoted this fight. And this is what I want to get into it with you. He's not the prototypical boxer, right? He is waging war right now on the sport of mixed martial arts. That is essentially what he is doing. What say you?
I'm interested in that aspect of it, right? Because, again, as a boxer, as a promoter, all those things, I have a lot of respect for Jake Paul. But what he's really trying to do with mixed martial arts, I still feel like I'm kind of in a wait-and-see mode, right? I mean, he's clearly using the feud with Dana White to kind of, I think, to help promote. And it is. It's smart. I mean, if you can have UFC President Dana White, who's one of the biggest figures in all of combat sports, talking about you, it only helps you to the point now that even Dana White has basically told us as media, stop asking about this guy. Like, I don't care. I don't want to talk about him. It's not my sport. Stop asking me about him. So, you know, if it's just been a promotional tactic, then, I mean, still kudos to you for figuring it out and for kind of lighting the flame and getting people talking about it. But if he really does care in what he says he does, which is that, you know, he wants to form a fighters union and he wants to help raise the pay for mixed martial artists and also long-term health care, which is a big part of it. I mean, everybody wants more money, but that's one part of it that's really important as well, is to have health care after you're done competing in a sport that's incredibly grueling on your body. I mean, if that really is at his core of what he's trying to do, and it's not about promoting, it's not about helping build his brand or help promote a fight, then you got to say, once again, hats off to him for doing that. So I guess we'll see where this goes. You know, they made a bet ahead of time. They said, look, Anderson Silva, if you beat me, then I'll go face you. And at first he said mixed martial arts contest. That changed to a kickboxing fight when Anderson said that, you know, I'm not competing in mixed martial arts anymore. But he said, look, if I beat you, you join me in starting a fighters union. And he won. And supposedly they're going to start this fighters union now. So we'll see. I've seen iterations of this happen over the years, Eric. I've seen it, you know, but it never seems to get out of first gear. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what they'll be able to do. But again, Jake Paul has been, you know, a disruptor. I mean, that's kind of a buzzword these days, but he has been a disruptor throughout his career. The problem child. So is he going to be able to do it? Look, he's got money in the bank. He's got connections. He's got a willing audience out there. So maybe it'll happen. I guess we'll have to take a little bit of a wait and see. I'm cautiously optimistic, but again, You've seen it. I've seen it, Eric. We've seen a lot of starts of this kind of fighter union, fighter association thing, and it just never really seems to progress.
Well, let's table that because I do want to talk about the fight really quick, but I do want to get into that. And like, I don't see a scenario in how it works. And I'll tell you why, just from a business perspective. I'm a business owner, right? I own multiple locations of gyms and business. That's what I do. That's a hard, road to hoe there.
Yes, it is.
But with the fight itself, is Anderson Silva didn't look bad. He looked good. But what was very disappointing to me, and I don't know where this came from, right? And the problem is with this is that the internet's a buzz now of, was this a work? Was it a this? Was it a that? Like, first of all, Anderson Silva ain't going to do that, right? He's not going to do a work. So let's just cut all that crap out now. But he did have like first round, he didn't throw any punches, right? The second round, he won clearly. Couple close rounds, but every close rounds was wild inactivity from Anderson Silva.
Yeah, I agree. So the first round didn't disappoint me too much. I mean, Anderson Silva has kind of done that throughout his mixed martial arts career, where he'll just kind of take it slow at first. He'll study you. He'll watch your movement. He'll throw some feints out there to try to set some things up. So I said, okay, that works. Round two, he looked good in round two. Started showing off some footwork. Started, shucking and jiving and doing a little bit of the dancing that he does in there. I was loving what I saw from round two. But then as we progressed on, yes, you're right. There were moments of inactivity. And also, even in the moments he did start going, it was like the distance wasn't really right. He was kind of crowding himself a little bit and getting in too tight, and that was allowing Jake Paul to clinch him. Plus, it was now, to his credit, Anderson Silva was having some success inside with those little uppercuts that were scoring, but it was also allowing Jake Paul to clinch him and slow the action down and reset. And so I thought, if Anderson had simply backed up a little bit, stayed at a little bit further range, can't quite be at kickboxing range because you can't throw any kicks, but still stay outside a little bit, I feel like he could have had some more success there. And I think that ultimately cost him. But, as you said, I thought Jake Paul, I thought he showed some courage in there because I thought, again, after round two, when Anderson started being Anderson, I thought I saw a little bit of Jake kind of looking like, have I made a mistake here? But he dug deep, made the adjustments. He was willing to go in there and have a firefight with a legendary figure, and he got the job done. So, I just, to me, again, at the end of it, I thought, well, that's 47-year-old Anderson Silva. I think that's kind of what we saw, unfortunately.
This has happened repeatedly in Jake Paul fights. He telegraphs this overhand right from 7 miles away, and yet it continues to land from 7 miles away. And I say all that to say this is like, one, yes, we know the guy's got tremendous power. But what made Anderson Silva great in mixed martial arts and all that shucking and jiving and showboating and the rope-a-dope tactic that he used, that actually kind of hurt him a little bit in this fight. Because every time he started to do that a little bit, guess what? This telegraphed from, like, even my grandmother could see this telegraphed overhand right coming away, and he would throw it, and whether it landed clean or not, it left an impression every single time he threw it.
Absolutely. And he's a big, strong, powerful guy. I mean, that's the one thing you can say about Jake Paul. He is a natural athlete, and he does have power when he throws that big right hand. So it has success for him. I mean, look, I think the big question I saw coming in is how far can Jake Paul go? And listen, I mean, he's talking about being a world champion. I mean, I don't necessarily see that for his future. I could be wrong. Now, if he continues to improve and continues to commit himself the way he is, perhaps. I mean, if you look at where he's at in his and you look at where he's at in his career, I mean, it's not unheard of for boxers to go 10, 15 fights without facing a real opponent. So if you want to say that he's not facing real opponents, he's doing it in a smart way because he's taking guys that have names that are kind of past their primes or what have you. But, I mean, in boxing, you don't face anybody until you're 15-0, 16-0, 20-0 maybe before you actually face somebody that's a real opponent. So it's not out of the ordinary for a boxer of this experience level to not be facing real competition. So I don't, fault him for doing that. I just, what I see in there does not strike me as, oh, my gosh, this is going to be a future world champion. But, look, I willingly paid my money on Saturday night because I was interested and I was intrigued by doing it. So if he keeps putting together interesting fights, who cares?
Hey, the guy is he is meant to promote. Like, that is what he was born to do. This, he is doing a fabulous job in doing it. And you kind of took my segue there. Again, you're notorious for doing this to me. But is Jake Paul the real deal? And to your point, you just said, I don't know yet. remains to be seen. You know, what he is clearly doing is he is clearly knocking off names that you have a lot of sentimental value to people, right? He's clearly knocking off names that he is clearly bigger than, right? And he is knocking off names that are making him money right now. Do you see him, like, at this point? I can't see, like, Nate Diaz, do not take this fight, first of all. Do not. I will not be able to stomach this.
Oh, I'm telling you, man. I know, that's the fight that they've been setting up, but I'm kind of the same way as you. I walked away Saturday night a little sad in my heart, and I think if Nate takes that fight, I might walk away a little sad in my heart as well. I mean, look, if Nate can make a few $1 million for doing it, then, I'm not going to try to stand in his way of doing that. But, yeah, I mean, I will say that, Jake Paul, while look, he's simultaneously saying, Canelo, let me come fight Canelo. No, Canelo would absolutely wax him. There is no question in my mind. But in terms of, mixed martial artists that are smaller than him, like, Jake Paul is going to beat most of them. That's just the honest to God truth. Well, I think Jake Paul is a better boxer than most mixed martial artists these days, especially those that are smaller than him. But to see him fight elite level competition, I don't know that he's as ready for that as he may think he is. He's not ready for Canelo, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so Anderson Silva weighed in 2 pounds below the registered limit with full clothes on. So obviously he didn't cut a single pound for this. Right. Jake Paul's in there in his skivvies. You know what I mean? So, from guys that have been like, that have had to cut weight, and then, and your experience with this, the minute they jumped on the scale, I was like, man, I don't like this already. But, hey, whatever. But Anderson Silva did fight at 185, and so that's what the registered bout was. So it was a little weird seeing him weighing with full clothes on, and not at the ceremonial one. That was at the earlier ones. He weighed in with all
right.
Clothes on.
Right. Just goes to show you that's probably where he's walking around at these days, right?
Yeah. So, okay, Jake Paul, you're the real deal. I'm going to say you're the real deal. Are you that upper echelon? Probably not yet. But am I going to put any doubt in you moving forward? I'm not. You've proved me right and wrong every single time. You've proved me right, knowing that I know that you have the power and the talent. And you've proved me wrong because you hurt my damn heart.
It's so true, man. I can't tell you the sadness in the Morgan household we had on Saturday night. But look, to your point, I would 100% favor him against Nate Diaz. I mean, I've already seen some opening odds come out that showed Jake Paul as a heavy favorite. And I just looked at him and thought, yeah, that's about right. He would be a heavy favorite. Again, significantly larger, no question about it, and has really been committed to his craft of boxing. I mean, while the mixed martial artists box as part of their routine, they've also got to wrestle. They've also got to do jiu-jitsu. They've also got to do Muay Thai. I mean, they've got to focus on all these things. It's so much to train all the time, whereas Jake Paul is simply focusing on boxing, and he's improving. He's definitely getting better each time out. We're seeing improved skills each time out. So I do not believe that at this time he would beat a legit world champion. No, I don't. But I would favor him against most mixed martial artists.
And what I want to be clear for everybody out here, this is how I'm going to save face today. All right. Is that you only see mixed martial artists go one way. You don't see boxers go the other. Let's 100%. Be clear about this.
There's no question. But that's just to be fair. Understand, it's two different sports. It is 100% two different sports. And you take any elite level boxer and put them in a cage. Take the best boxer you can find and put them in a cage against a legitimate mixed martial artist. That mixed martial artist will win every time. Leg kicks, takedowns, grappling, all that side of the game. And it goes the other way. It's one of the reasons, listen, this discussed matchup of Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury, right? I don't want to see it happen. And I feel bad saying that because, Francis Ngannou is saying, look, I can go over there and I can make $30 million. I don't want to stop a man from making $30 million, but I don't think he would win against Tyson Fury because you take an elite level mixed martial artist and you put him in a boxing ring, they're going to lose. It's just a different sport. It's, we saw this. When we saw Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, that the lead up to that matchup, I was doing all these interviews with mainstream radio stations, and they're like, how much of a chance do you give Conor? And it's like, listen, it's going to be fun. It's going to be spectacle. It's going to be crazy to see because we don't see stuff like this in our lifetime. Two of the biggest superstars crossing over to other sports, but it's two different sports. Floyd Mayweather is a master of this. Conor McGregor doesn't have much of a chance here. I mean, yes, he's got the big left hand, but the odds of that landing are very slim. But the flip side is true. If Floyd Mayweather came and had a mixed martial arts contest with Conor McGregor, I would give him zero chances of winning, like absolutely zero. So it is, it's two different sports, and I respect Anderson for doing it. And look, for a 47-year-old guy, he looked pretty damn good for a 47-year-old guy, but it was just, at the end of the day, I walked away on Saturday night a little bit sad because Anderson Silva really is one of the legends of this sport, and to see him go out there and lose to a 25-year-old kid who's only a handful of fights in his career, it was just sad. It was just sad.
It was, man. Oh gosh, I replay it. And that knockdown, it wasn't this ferocious whatever. Anderson Silva, it was a perfectly timed shot, counter shot in a off balance. Anderson Silva knocked him down, wasn't overly hurt. But hey, that's the intricacies of boxing, where in MMA you can be off balance every once in a while because you have another discipline to fall back on. Not in boxing. Not in boxing.
Put him down. That was just the icing on the cake, wasn't it? You already knew at that point he was going to lose the decision. You're like, oh man, because I thought Anderson was going to win via decision. That's the way I thought. And through 2 rounds, I was feeling pretty good about it. And then as we got into 6, 7, and 8, you just kind of knew it wasn't going to happen. But yeah, then when he gets knocked down as well, I agree with you. It wasn't like it was a flash and he was super hurt and you're like, oh my gosh, is he going to get back up? Everything you laid it out exactly right, but it was still just like the face palm, the icing on the horrible cake of just
Hey, listen, Anderson. Okay, I didn't have this on my run sheet today, but now that we're talking about it, I have to bring it up. Does this diminish Anderson Silva at all?
I don't think so. I mean, listen, if anything was going to diminish him, and I hate to say this, it was the end of his mixed martial arts career, right? And that's why it's such a hard thing when you talk about like the argument of like the greatest fighters of all time is, how much do you factor in what they do when they're past their prime? Because Anderson Silva as middleweight champion of the UFC is absolutely one of the greatest figures that ever competed in the sport of mixed martial arts. That dude was on another level, but over time, the tail end of his career, he just wasn't the same guy anymore. And he suffered a string of a lot of consecutive losses. You could say the same about a guy like, BJ Penn, who I think many of us wish maybe would have hung it up a little bit sooner or what have you. I think that kind of tarnishes their legacy a bit. So to be honest with you, I don't think it does. I mean, it'll be just a little footnote in the chapter of his legacy of like, hey man, he went out there, fought a guy half his age in a sport that wasn't one that he competed in, one that he always wanted to compete in, and he got a chance to do it. So I don't think it necessarily tarnishes his legacy so much. I think, unfortunately, the losses at the end of his career kind of already did that, if I can say that in the most respectful way possible to a true legend.
Well, what we do know is he most likely got paid a handsome penny for this fight. Reports that I read is that he got a guaranteed purse of $500,000 and 35%. 35% of the pay-per-view. So
not bad.
He got 35% of your $59.
Yes, he did. I'm happy I gave it to him. He did enough for the sport. I'm happy to give him 35%.
But you know what? Jake Paul got 60% of your $59.
Well, we won't talk about that.
All right. Well, hey, listen, I said it before. I'm going to say it again. I give you my full credit, Jake Paul. I'm a man of my word. I always said you had the skill and the power. You showed it again this weekend. Just for my sake, don't call out Nate Diaz. Just stop. Let's move to a real boxer now. Let's prove us all wrong that you are an elite boxer and not just an elite picking off past their prime MMA fighters. Can we agree on that, Jake Paul? Can we agree on that, John Morgan?
Let's do it. I'm in. I agree. I'd love to see it.
Sounds good. Okay. Now, you were not at the boxing match in Phoenix on Saturday night, but you were at UFC Fight Night 213 at the Apex Center. And, main event that kind of a bummer, Arnold Allen winning by TKO victory over Calvin Kattar, blown out knee. Take us through it.
Yeah, unfortunate because this was, highly anticipated matchup between two, kind of all action fighters in the featherweight division with a real meaning, in the title picture as well. So it was a very, very exciting matchup on paper. And unfortunately, it just got ended early. Arnold Allen looked good in the early going, but Calvin Kattar at the very end of the opening round, he tries this kind of, I guess, ill-advised flying knee and, the plants. And we see the legs, the knee buckles and gives way, the right knee. And, we saw footage earlier of it snapping. You can see the ligament actually pop. It's pretty crazy. So You know, he tried to fight out. Kudos to Calvin Kattar, man. He goes to the corner, tries to come out. You know, the doctors. I mean, first of all, he could have ended it right there. I mean, Arnold Allen, you know, jumped down to the ground, tried to strike him, tried to choke him, and Calvin Kattar could have easily just curled up in a ball and let him, you know, get it done and get out of there. He didn't. He fought through it, went to the corner, came out the second. The doctor comes looking. This man has a clearly blown out knee. He's trying to fake it, like, oh no, I'm moving good, I'm fine, I can compete. But as soon as you know, the round starts, 8 seconds in, a leg kick to the other leg actually forces him to put his weight there and shift, and he falls to the ground. And at that point, you got to wave it off. And man, you could just see the frustration on Calvin Kattar's face, you know, and realizing, I think that's probably, you know, a year out of rehab and just an unfortunate ending for him. He was in real pain, man, as he was leaving the cage, actually just trying to walk down the stairs to get out of the octagon. He had to put weight on it, and he actually kind of winced out and yelled in pain. So, I mean, you know, it was an unfortunate scene. And for Arnold Allen, it's kind of an unfortunate scene as well, right? Because here's this kid now that's 10-0 in the UFC, but he even said it afterwards. He wanted to kind of make a statement and to call out Alexander Volkanovski, the champ, and say, hey, you know, give me this opportunity. And he's like, how can I call a guy out after this? You know, this wasn't the statement made. So it was just an unfortunate result all the way around, because now you've got a really good fighter who's going to be on the shelf for a year, and you got another really good fighter who really didn't move forward with the result. You know, just kind of stuck there at the top of the title picture along with some other names. So it was, I guess maybe that happening in a few hours before I would see Anderson Silva. It was just a really bad Saturday night, to be honest with you, man. It was just kind of one where you left the Apex like, well, we didn't get any resolution. We didn't get any progress.
Well, if we're going to look from a moving forward standpoint, like, it's almost worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario is you have Calvin Kattar. He drops to 7-5, which is clearly like he is the best worst record guy in that division. He's going to be out a significant amount of time. And like modern film these days, where you can actually see that injury happening, it's like crazy, the technology that we have. Like, if you want to see it go, I don't recommend it. It's like, if you get squeamish like I do, like, it's gross, right? Just because you know the immense pain that he's in. But Arnold Allen, right? Oh, and by the way, first ever TKO loss for Calvin Kattar, amazingly. And it comes by a blown out knee.
Crazy.
Right? So, but Arnold Allen, here's a guy who's kind of like, I don't like to say he's flown under the radar, because everybody clearly does know who he is. He knows the name, but he's a guy 10-0 in the UFC right now. And we're just at that one spot. He needs that one little ignition, that one little somebody gaslighting him to get there. And this was his moment, and he didn't get it. And what a bum, just a bum deal for him.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, this was his first UFC main event, so this was kind of the opportunity to be the breakout fighter in the featherweight division. You know, and he's a young guy, man. He's 28 years old, but he's kind of reaching his prime. He hasn't taken the fast track. I mean, he's 10-0 in the UFC, but it's been kind of a slow burn for him to get here. But, you know, you look at some of the names he's beat. You know, Gilbert Melendez, Nick Lentz, Sadiq Youssef, Dan Hooker, now Calvin Kattar. He's been, you know, as you said, a little bit under the radar, not the first name on the lips when you're talking about contenders, but, you know, hardcores are watching this guy saying that's the future right there. That guy's going to be a contender in the future. And this was the moment to kind of break out of that and to actually be a contender, not just be a prospect. And he really didn't get that result. So he was frustrated afterwards as well. You know, he did say, listen, on the bright side, I felt good, you know, and he did look good. I mean, everything seemed to be going his way. He was really gaining some momentum late in the opening round. So, you know, he got the opportunity to be in a main event. So he knows what that feels like now. He got the opportunity to prepare for a 5-round fight. So all those things are good. It's just, again, you just don't walk out with that exclamation point of putting yourself head and shoulders above everybody else in that division. I guess the way I'm looking at it, Eric, the only bright side is we know that right now Alexander Volkanovski is targeting a move up to 155 pounds to go face Islam Makhachev. I honestly am not normally a fan of champions leaving their division, because it leaves a lot of contenders kind of sitting around waiting and not getting their opportunity. But the way things have worked out, it's kind of the perfect opportunity, right? I mean, Yair Rodriguez wants to make a statement. He wins against an injury to Brian Ortega. You know, now Arnold Allen wants to make a statement. He wins via injury over Calvin Kattar. You know, it's nobody has really stepped forward where you're like, that's the guy that's got to go. I mean, the other guy that would have a statement as well is Josh Emmett, but a lot of people think he actually lost the fight to Calvin Kattar in their split decision. So you've got these three names basically at the top of the featherweight division, but none of them are really above each other. And so I think that at least gives time to maybe set up a matchup between some of them for somebody to really take a step forward while Alexander Volkanovski goes and fights at 155 pounds. So if you're looking for some silver lining around this result, it might be that, in that at this point, if Volkanovski moves up for at least one fight, he's not holding anybody down in the process.
So somebody who didn't take a step up, kind of like we were just talking about, but definitely took a step back, is Chase Hooper. He was on this card, and just to reset, so everybody's well aware, this is a kid who came in 2019, one of the youngest fighters to ever make the UFC roster, may even have been the youngest at the time. He was 20 years old, and coming in, everybody knew that, like, hey, his striking isn't on the level, but his jiu-jitsu chops and his grappling chops are off the chain, which, is going to give him time to develop this striking. He loses by devastating fashion in something like 92 seconds, right? And it just gets, just gets railroaded. His striking looked like it even took even more of a step back. And now somebody who had all this promise, like, hey, is this the future? Is this the future? When he's only 20, fast forward 6 fights, he's 3-3 in the UFC, coming off just a devastating, knockout loss.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 92 seconds, and to be honest with you, it probably could have been stopped before that. I mean, I think it was Herb Dean that was the referee that was giving him every opportunity to recover. And to his credit, he would roll, he would move, he would do all the things that you obviously as a trained referee know that you're looking to see, that a guy is still in the fight, but he just wasn't really in that fight. Steve Garcia dropped him early, and Chase Hooper, was trying to do anything he could, trying to dive for the legs, trying to roll anything he could to turn it into a grappling contest. But to his credit, Steve Garcia said, absolutely not. I'm not going to even, go down and settle in your guard and give you the opportunity. I'm going to push away. I'm going to get back to the feet, and I'm going to keep tagging you up. And it is a devastating setback, because at 23 years old, I mean, there's still a ton of time, but you can't take shots like that. And I think that was one of the concerns early on, because even when Chase Hooper was picking up wins, he was getting hit a lot, and I think a lot of people were noting that early on and saying, look, I mean, he's showing this chin, and it's exciting, and the guy's tough as nails, but you can't keep doing this as you're going to progress up the ranks. And I think that's what we're seeing. So yeah, a real unfortunate night for Chase Hooper, who's, I mean, such a good kid. He's actually filled in for me at CFFC on the mic a handful of times, and we see him do a lot of work with UFC Fight Pass. So we see his personality and get to see him do some fun stuff. He's a good kid. But there's some deficiencies in his game right now that he's going to have to shore up. And I think he's kind of already addressed that as well. And as he said in a long social media post, it is the thing about this sport, man. Like, everybody has a bad night in the office. It's just when you have a bad night in the office as a cage fighter, you end up getting your ass kicked in front of all the world to see. And that sucks, man. It does. And it's a horrible reality. So, I mean, listen, at 23, the great thing is he's got a lot of time on his side. So if he wants to take some time off and really work on some things versus competing, I think there's a real chance for him to improve it. But bottom line is, he's just got to shore up that striking ability. He's got to make sure he's not getting hit like this in fights.
And a lot of people were tremendously excited about this kid, right? I know I was when he first came in. But there's a cautionary tale out there, is that everybody thinks they're ready, and there's a lot of pundits that be like, might not be ready for this level yet. Is this one of those cautionary tales of Chase Hooper just wasn't ready for the UFC at this point?
It's tough, man. Listen, it's hard. And it's one reason I'm so worried right now about Raul Rosas Jr., right? Coming in at 18 years old. I mean,
and you're segueing exactly. He was the next name on my list because of this point exactly.
It's why I'm so nervous for him. And I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, well, he shouldn't get, because I get it. There's all these, I mean, everybody that trains with Raul Rosas Jr. says the dude is the real deal. I mean, the guy is legit. And watching his fight on the Contender Series and watching the tape that's out there on him, he hadn't fought a whole lot of real experienced guys, but on the Contender Series, he did show some awesome abilities against a very good opponent in Mondo Gutierrez. So I was impressed with what I saw there. But it just scares me a little bit that young. You know what I mean? You've got guys look, we talk about man strength, right? You know what I mean? You kind of you pack on this muscle, you pack on these things later in life as you get a little bit older and you have more experience. And I mean, I get it. You want to get to the highest level as quickly as possible because you want to make the big money as quickly as possible. And the UFC is the best place to do that. But it does scare me a little bit when you're that young. I don't know. It just worries me. And again, I'm not counting the guy out, and I'm not trying to rain on the dude's parade. Like, I'm just as excited to see how he does in there. I'm just being honest. I'm being a realist, and I'm nervous a little bit because when you get in there so young, I mean, there haven't been many people that we've seen in there that have gotten in incredibly young and had these long, storied, incredible careers. You know, you can go through the ringer pretty early in your life, and it can sour you or it can physically change you. So, yes, it scares me a little bit, you know, when these younger guys get into the sport at the highest level.
Here's like the skills are the skills, right? And I think a lot of times your skills, you know, at this point, both of them, Chase Hooper and who were we just talking about?
Rosas Jr.
Yeah, Rosas Jr. So their skills can improve, but I think where maturity comes into play and experience comes into play. I remember when I was 20 years older for Rosas Jr. with 17. Like, I'm running through everything. It was in stupid plans, but I'm like, guess what? I'm not cautiously optimistic about anything at that age, right? I'm Superman. I'm going. And that's what backslides people's careers is, to your point, Chase Hooper. We don't want to see you taking those shots. Yes, we know you can get into firefights. Yes, we know you're tough. We know you're this. If you look at a guy like, let's take the aforementioned Anderson Silva, he is tactically bobbing and weaving and not taking these big shots to show. He is putting on a showman cap while saying, guess what? I'm not going to get hit, and I'm just going to wait for my opportunity. And that is what scares me about these young kids as well.
I agree 100%, man. You go out there and you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? And that's something we've learned in life, is that with experience, you know, and age, you start to figure these things out a little bit. So, you know, I'm excited. You know, again, the good thing is time on the side for Chase Hooper. The improvements can be made. The good thing is everybody around Raul Rosas Jr. says he's the real deal. Like his coaches, his parents, I mean, they had to go to the commission to get a special exemption to let this kid fight. It wasn't like the UFC just signed him up and they couldn't say no. The people that are closest to him believe that he deserves the opportunity, and they stood beside him and they attested for him and they got him the opportunity, and he went in there and he won. He's going to fight at UFC 282 on December 10th in Las Vegas, so we'll get to see it at the UFC level. He'll be the youngest debuting fighter. He has turned 18 since he was 17 on the Contender Series show, but it just makes me nervous. And again, I'm not trying to downplay the guy. It's just me being honest that I say, oh, I wish you the best. I wish you the best, but I'm nervous at the same time. I'm gonna be watching, wringing my hands a little bit when you make your way into the cage, just because again, you don't know what you don't know at that age.
Yeah, and you know, but he's gonna come in full of piss and vinegar with not a fear in the world, and that's what we know these kids do, right? So
that's it.
All right, Jake Paul ripped our hearts out. We saw kind of just like a ho-hum UFC Fight Night. But we do have a fight night coming up this week. Let's just briefly touch on it. There was Bellator this weekend too, but it was a weird card. Nothing, you know, Leon Edwards' brother picked up a victory. Weird little interactions after the fight. But anyways, we'll fast forward. We'll move past Bellator. UFC Fight Night 214 coming up this weekend. Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Lemos. You know, some future title implications probably on the line here. Also, the fight I'm looking forward to, Neil Magny versus D-Rod. D-Rod's a fun fighter to watch. Magny always puts on a show. What are you thinking about this fight night card?
Yeah, I think those top two fights especially are really important. Marina Rodriguez, I think, is a lot of fun to watch fight. She's somebody that will be fighting for a title very soon. She's Muay Thai by trade. She's aggressive. She's a lot of fun and entertaining every time she gets out there. And Amanda Lemos the same. I mean, I think these are two Brazilians that are going to go out there and look to stand and bang. I like Marina Rodriguez in this fight. I think she's fighting for a title sometime next year. So if you want to familiarize yourself with her, here's an opportunity to do so. She's a very fun fighter. As you said, Neil Magny, the veteran, D-Rod, you know, kind of the up-and-comer right now, the hard hitter. I mean, both of them can like to stand and strike as well. This should be a very fun fight. So I think these top two especially are definitely worth your time. I'll throw out one other name on there as well that I'm excited to watch is Jailton Almeida. This kid looks like he is the absolute real deal coming out of Brazil. Started at light heavyweight. He's since been taking some fights at heavyweight. He says he can do both. He's actually taken a catchweight fight here against Maxim Grishin, but that's somebody I think you definitely want to keep your eyes on. So, you know, again, this is one of those cards that it's not loaded with stars. It's not loaded with, you know, certain number one contender fights or championship opportunities, but these are the cards where you kind of identify who's going to be the next star and who's going to make their way up to the top. So, you know, it's fights here at the Apex. It's something to do on a Saturday.
Hey, listen, it's always a fun time watching humans fight each other. So
it's crazy.
You really can't go wrong, though. You know what I mean?
But guess what? It's terrible. But it's what we do.
But guess what? We are only 2 weeks away. See, this is where like my energy level shoots back up after the heartbreak that we took. We are only 2 weeks away from, listen, I don't care who's headlining. When you have a fight night at the Garden, you know it's a big deal. Set the stage for us. I can't do it the justice you can. UFC 281, 2 weeks away, live, Madison Square Garden. Take it away.
Unbelievable. UFC 281, the fight card that everybody is looking forward to in the mixed martial arts space. I mean, Madison Square Garden is big, but when you have a fight like Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, I mean, everybody is on edge about this, right? This is a championship fight with a story behind it as well. These two guys met each other before in kickboxing. Alex Pereira actually knocked out Israel Adesanya. Now, Israel Adesanya will be quick to tell you, go back and watch the fight because he was winning the fight up to that point, but he still did get caught. So there's history between these two, and they don't like each other much. And Pereira is saying, I'm going to put you out cold again. He's like, I put you out cold with those big pillows on my hands. Wait till I get you with these little 4-ounce gloves. I'm going to light you up. And I mean, it's a fight that is absolutely everything you could ask for in a championship matchup. So I cannot wait for UFC 281.
There are levels to this game in striking, and then there are levels on top of levels. These two guys have it. Israel Adesanya this is a guy who manipulates distance like nobody can. And we've seen it against Whitaker. We've seen it against Vettori. We've seen it against, pretty much everybody. The only person that I can recall that gave him a big type fight was Kelvin Gastelum. And he was the only one who could close that distance and was willing to walk through fire. Now he's fighting a guy in 2 weeks, Alex Pereira, that is going to stand at that range with him. So it begs the question to me, after knowing that he can get his lights out, and he being Israel Adesanya, knowing that his lights can be put out, does he implore a mixed martial arts game to this fight?
That's the big question. I mean, I think you have to, right? I mean, Alex Pereira has already knocked you out. Now, as Adesanya says, that was a different sport. That was a different time. That was a different era. That shouldn't even factor in here. But it does. It has to factor in at least. Yeah, it does. At least a little bit mentally for both guys, because Adesanya is mentally strong, but he looks across the cage and he knows that guy has knocked me out. Meanwhile, Alex Pereira, as you said, he's got that confidence in himself. He's like, I know what this guy does. I mean, I know nobody else does, but I do because I've seen it and I've knocked the guy out.
And he looks unstoppable right now.
Dude,
he looks like a RoboCop wrecking machine.
Absolute monster that you almost have no idea how he makes 185 pounds. I mean, the dude is massive, and he comes in there packing all kinds of power, and that's what makes this fight so intriguing. So to go back to your original question, I think that's the question mark that we all have right now, that we're all trying to see is, does Adesanya stand and try to do what he normally does, which is be very elusive? As you said, manage the distance properly, set the traps, move. It's some of the greatest striking that we've ever seen. Or because he realizes what's at stake here and how much power his opponent packs, does he try to wrestle a little bit, try to clinch a little bit, try to take this thing down, make this a mixed martial arts contest where we show all facets of the game? I don't know. And that's what makes the fight so intriguing. And to do it with the UFC title on the line in the main event at Madison Square Garden, I mean, it's so crazy, right? Because even as, we talked about going into UFC 280 a few weeks ago with, this heavily anticipated matchup between Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, but this was the other fight that everybody was talking about as well. I mean, those two fights, the level of anticipation, probably the biggest of the year. I mean, hardcore fans, because of that question, how is Adesanya going to execute in this fight? Is the power of Pereira going to be too much? Is the mind games going to be too much? Just all the questions here, man. This is a phenomenal title fight. This is as good as it gets.
Carlos Esparza versus Zhang Weili in the co-main event spot. Zhang Weili is, fun fighter to watch. I'm a huge fan of her. Carlos Esparza, remains to be seen if she's really that championship material. Coming off a weird fight, weird, awkward fight versus Thug Rose. But outside of the main event, I think the fight of the night potentially is
No,
the bitter enemies turned weird bromance again fight between Dustin the Diamond Poirier and Michael Chandler. Like, we'll get into the stylistic matchups of it next week, but what is to make of the weird little, road to the fight that these guys have taken?
it is, man. I as soon as you said the fight outside, I mean, I already know, like, this is the one we're all looking forward to because stylistically it's going to be a banger, man. Absolutely cannot wait for Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. But it is weird too, right? Because these are really like two of the nicest dudes in the sport. I mean, they're like two of the nicest guys, and you'd think that they would, happily get along and be like, hey, we're just gonna go in there and punch each other and see who wins. And no hard, but they've had a little back and forth. They've had a little, a little bit of a rivalry into this, a little bit of trash talking going to it. It's kind of been a little bit out of character for both of them. So intrigued by it. It's added some flavor to it. But honestly, this is one of those fights that didn't need any flavor. I mean, from the minute it was announced, I think everybody was just like, oh, cannot wait for that. Because it's just going to be action-packed for as long as it lasts.
Well, and it's funny. Did you watch the Daniel Cormier like side-by-side interview where he's trying to entice them to like start talking crap about each other and get into almost another brawl like they did at UFC Salt Lake City, where they had to be separated at Cageside as fans, and then for them to just be like, it's a misunderstanding. Like it was this. It was like I was watching. I'm like, no, I want blood. It's still real to me. Damn it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why it was so out of character for them to get into it the first time. You're like, what? Why are these guys going at it? And I think now they're like, when they're face to face, we can't do that, man. But listen, I'll leave what he said off the record. But I was down in Florida last week at American Top Team, and it was kind of cool to see. Number one, Dustin Poirier was the last guy in the gym. Practice was over, training sessions were done, and he was still there putting in work. So he was the last guy, even at this phase of his career where he's done it all, seen it all, put in the hard work. He was still putting in the hard work. It was great. But I will say off record, he had some not so nice things to say about Michael Chandler that were not for reporting. So there's a little bit of flavor below the surface,
Well, when we hit stop recording, I'm going to ask you about that. So, because it's still off the record then, right? Now we're just catching conversation. But did you ever get a chance to go see Michael Chandler just not too far down the street from there in that new mega facility gym, which is awesome?
Unbelievable. Yeah. So we started the day actually at Killcliff. They were in the middle of team practice, so there's a whole lot going on. So I didn't really get to, hang with Michael Chandler at all, but excuse me. But yes, that facility is phenomenal, man. It was my first time being in that new gym. And it's so cool, man. It made me excited just to see, because American Top Team, their facility that's been around for a few, is incredible as well. But, you got these two high-level teams just a few miles apart, but in these world-class facilities. Obviously we've got some out here in Vegas as well, but it's just cool to see these massive training centers and state-of-the-art facilities that are being implemented around the world that guys are training in, man. It's cool to see, because you think about where this sport started. It was like people training in garages and, throwing mats. I mean, I know Rich Franklin used to talk about like a little storage shed he had out in his backyard that he would, watch some videos and train in there, to now these truly, world-class facilities with, rehab facilities in there as well. And all this. I mean, it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to like we said a couple weeks ago, just let's fast forward. Let's just fast forward to, to UFC 280. Now let's just fast forward 281. I cannot wait. But listen, I said I've been manufacturing this energy today because I'm still a little heartbroken. So let's just go ahead and end it there. But again, Jake Paul, taking my hat off to you. Go ahead, follow me on _MacLife. You can hear me whine about all that stuff on my Twitter. He is John Morgan _MMA. If you want to go back and check out whatever we said on our previous episodes, go ahead, check us out on the archives. You can watch these episodes on grindcitymedia.com, youtube.com, stream them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you reach your get your streaming. What do you got going on this week?
Listen, we're going to be in town this week. It's the calm before the storm for me, because so I'm going to relax and enjoy it. Like I said, we got the UFC at the Apex, but next week is going to be a crazy one, man. We got Thursday night, we've got a CFSC event down in Tampa, Florida. Friday morning, we'll travel to North Carolina to Fort Bragg. We're putting on a collegiate wrestling meet for the first time on UFC Fight Pass, Battle at the Bragg. I'm excited for that. It's history being made. And then Saturday morning, I'll get up and fly to New York for UFC 281. So it is going to be a chaotic week next week. So I'm going to enjoy this one, the calm before the storm. This one, we'll take it in stride and get ready for the madness of next week.
I'm so pumped that Fight Pass is embracing amateur wrestling now and bringing it up on their platform because, aside from that, Flow Sports is the only one you can get. And Flow Sports is like, don't get me wrong, I subscribe to Flow Sports, but it's expensive as hell.
Super expensive. But it's like $35 a month. You get much cheaper on Fight Pass though.
Right. And now if we're going to start getting wrestling, which I love to watch, man, UFC Fight Pass is doing it right. Pick up this podcast here, Dan, pretty soon, which I'm sure you guys will be able to see here shortly. But because we're taking over the airwaves with this podcast. For me, I'm just coming off getting sick, but I also commentated Fights Attitude MMA this past weekend. Saw some really good fights. Main event was a fight between a guy named Solo Hatley Jr. and Brandon Gator. Brandon Gator fight CFFC. Solo Hatley Jr. has fought in, I believe, for the LFA world title at one point. That was the main event. I commentated that. It was a good fight night. Tonight, I'm taking my little one trick or treating. This is going to be cool. So my 3-year-old Ethan, he's got long blonde hair, right? And then my daughter Kyle, she's got long brown hair. So they're Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World.
That's awesome. That's a great one,
I'm just totally stoked. What's your boy gonna be?
He's got a couple costumes. I got to see what he's going with tonight. His favorite one has been a character from Fortnite. He's been Fish Stick, which has been kind of funny to watch him walk around in that. He's got a little skeleton costume to go as well. So we got to see what he pulls out of the bag tonight.
It's whatever the mood brings him into at that time, right?
That's it. Kids, man. My kid's 10, man. He's got a different feeling for what he wants to do every day. So, yeah, we kind of support him. Let him roll with it.
Yeah, my son was Boss Baby when I took him to school this morning. So I got him in a whole suit. But I told everybody on my Instagram that he was Gordon Gekko.
All right. I can see that.
It's nice. Cool. But anyways, hey, fun episode today. The mood was a little down, but for obvious reasons. But we have a fight night to look forward to. And then we got the show at the Garden. We're pumped. I promise you next week I'm going to bring more energy because I promise you next week Jake Paul ain't going to break my heart. So for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Check us out next week on Cageside with John Morgan.